All right, welcome everyone to the 43rd episode of the AdvisorTech Book Live podcast. My guest today is Mark Tenenbaum of kitses.com. Welcome, Mark.
Joe, it's great to be here.
So your title is Director of Research, which is a very intimidating title. Is the main gist of that like overseeing the four different research reports, or what do you do?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So just as background at kitses.com, we produce four reoccurring research studies on practice management in rotating 6-month intervals, such that every 2 years we get through all four studies. Those four studies are on advisor well-being, technology, marketing, and productivity. And my job involves surveying hundreds of advisors twice a year with Michael Kitces and the rest of the team, and then writing large book-length research studies about the results, which is every bit as awesome as it sounds.
Yeah, it sounds painful for some people, but it sounds lovely for others. Is there one of the four studies that gets a lot more traction than the rest, or are they all fairly equal?
No, there are some pretty sharp divergences there. So decisively the most popular study in terms of traffic is our AdvisorTech study. That's sort of for obvious reasons, because in addition to appealing to advisors, it appeals to firm executives who want to make tech decisions for their firms. It appeals to investors who are investing in this fast growing space. And then after that, productivity is our second most popular um, report, followed by marketing, and then well-being gets the least volume of traffic.
Yeah, people don't care about being well, do they?
No, and they should, because as we say throughout the report, advisor well-being is an enormous uh, lever firms can pull to reduce turnover, and turnover is extraordinarily costly, right? Some groups, like employee advisors, if their well-being is low, have a 1 in 5 expected turnover rate over the coming
Wow.
years.
Yeah.
So firms absolutely should care about advisor well-being, just from the perspective of managing turnover. But maybe we haven't made that case as persuasively as we should, because again, this is the least popular of our four studies.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. People like to talk about the great wealth transfer, and I like to think of it as the transfer that's going to happen from bad advisors to good advisors over the next 10 years or so, as opposed to, because like generationally, wealth is always transferring. I don't know if there's ever like one pivotal generation shift where it's going to be more. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making that up, but it seems like wealth is always transferring.
You hear a very similar version of that statement very often, where um, it's not that AI is going to replace advisors; it's that the advisors who use AI are going to replace the advisors who don't use AI. So, regardless of whether folks agree or disagree with that, I hear a very similar version of that statement on LinkedIn and industry media regularly.
Yeah, so let's dive right into AI, because I think that's what
Sure.
both of us want to talk about the most. Is that what is your opinion on that statement?
All right, I'm going to interpret how broad the question is, as you asking just about the U.S. overall and not specifically our industry. So I'll answer at that higher level first, and I imagine we'll sort of zero in on financial services. Um, I don't know, not to get too existential with you, Joe, but I'm very pessimistic. I think just so much needs to go right as our nation and like the world navigates AI. So just start sort of with the most catastrophic and existential problems, and then sort of narrowing down. I mean, of course, there's the existential risk. So of misaligned AI, or if bad actors use AI to, for example, build chemical weapons or items like that. So again, that's the existential side. Then there's the risk of mass unemployment, which also gets a lot of attention. But then, in my view, there's actually a greater risk of smaller increases in unemployment. Why is that a greater risk? Because our as like folks know, our Congress and legislators are very gridlocked, right? And when they act, it's often when there's some sort of shock to the system. Think a major recession, passing stimulus, or all the bills they passed during COVID, right? So if unemployment is increasing at a rapid clip, then perhaps there'll be at least some sort of response. But AI doesn't need to reach like 30, 40, 50% unemployment for it to be super disruptive. So just for example, during the Great Recession, unemployment peaked at what, 9%, 11%, and it was enormously disruptive. So what to me is extremely an extremely worrying prospect is if unemployment slowly ticks up. Perhaps like white collar workers like myself who can leverage AI, their jobs are safe, but recent college graduates are having trouble finding new jobs. And then the increase in unemployment is slow enough to where there's no um, immediate impulse on legislators to act. So that's the employment end. Then there's just the already growing body of research about AI making us miserable and dumb. Maybe there's a more diplomatic way of phrasing that, but like in short, the process of summarizing an article, for example, doing the work, reading the article, interpreting it, that's how that process is how we learn. And when you offload that cognitive labor to AI, that's like doing your brain doing less reps and training less.
Yeah.
So I could say a lot more, but I'm sensitive to the length of this monologue, so maybe I'll punctuate my comments there.
No, it's fascinating. So yesterday I met with my physician, and he's just like a rural doctor in a super small town. And I asked him about AI because AI is big in the medical field as well. With like ours is AI note takers, but there's
Uh-huh.
note takers for doctors as well that like record everything and then create a note for the system. And he's like, "No, I like to type my own notes because that's how I remember what we talked about." And I was like, he's like, "I think we've peaked. Like, I think we're at the AI is about as good as it's ever gonna get, and from here, it's, like, only gonna get worse and worse." I thought that was a very
When you say as good as it's ever going to get, do you mean the social consequences of it? I'm assuming you don't mean like the level of the technology.
possibly. I mean, I didn't say that, he said that, but,
Oh, sure.
um, I think that's what he meant, like, the
Mhm.
usefulness in a way to society. I think AI is like I did a podcast or an interview with, Matt Middleton, and I was like, "I think AI is the worst thing that's ever happened to humanity, and it's also the best thing because it's almost like COVID for social issues in a way. It's almost gonna like increase the value of humans while it's decreasing, a lot of humans' value. Does that make
Can
sense?
you tell me more about both prongs, the worst aspect and the best aspect? I don't want to derail us here if you meant for this to be quick, but now this is for my own curiosity.
Yeah, we're derailed now for sure. Um, I think it's very bad for human brains and development. I mean, a lot of people, specifically for financial advisors, like if all these tasks that lead up to becoming a senior or a senior financial advisor, like the CSA, the paraplanner, the associate advisor, if all these roles are taken over by AI, then humans won't learn all the things they need to learn in order to be a qualified senior financial advisor. Um,
A good example of that is you brought up taking notes during meetings. Whose responsibility has that been historically? It's been the associate advisor who sits in the meeting and then records the notes, and then either they themselves enter it in the CRM or they pass it to the CSA or whomever. So yeah, that's a good example right there.
yeah, so I think overall, yeah, I don't want to spend too long on this, but um, AI is really complicated, and I think that I'm getting more and more open about like being anti AI because I think that not to go so far as like AI is evil, but AI is going to have some seriously bad consequences for humanity as a whole. I feel like.
Entirely agreed on humanity as a whole. So I will refrain from further comment here if you want to zero in on the advice industry.
Okay, that sounds good. All right. So I just made a list of topics we could discuss. Based on so you kind of look at advisor tech as a whole and not necessarily like the specific tools. Is that correct?
Me personally,
Yeah. Like in
yeah.
the research papers.
Oh, yes. So with our other three research studies, well-being, productivity, and marketing, I do the bulk of the writing.
Okay.
With advisor tech specifically, as you know, that it just there's just the number of companies out there develops at such a rapid clip. There's some go under, new ones emerge, and for this study, I write about the first 40% of the report. So, as background, the first chunk of the report is higher level industry commentary on advisor technology. And then I write that section. And then for the category by category write ups, and for those of you familiar with our research, we now have 45 AdvisorTech categories on our latest report. For those category by category write ups, I help with some of the behind the scenes number crunching. But then Michael Kitsis and then Ben Henry Moreland, who's responsible for our monthly AdvisorTech updates, our AdvisorTech map, our AdvisorTech directory, they take the lead on the category by category write up. So the answer to your question is yes. I sort of lead the higher level conversation in the front end of the report, and then for the nitty gritty vendor level discussions, those are led by Ben and Michael.
Okay. If you do hear a rooster in the background, there actually is a rooster in the background. We have like chickens and roosters running around our yard. Uh,
I
but
haven't, but I'm tempted to turn my volume up to try to
uh,
hear the next time yeah.
I'm hearing it, but I'm glad it's not coming through. Um, so 45 categories. I mean, that's one thing that has been, I've been following the T3 inside information report and then Kitz's report, and I've always liked the way Kitz has categorized them better than the other one. I mean, no fault to them, but how do you guys decide like what deserves its own category and how do these categories grow and change over time?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, the most obvious way it categories change over time is just by new tech emerging. So, for example, with our latest Advisor Tech report, we had a category on agentic AI assistance. So that's an example of a new category or new technology emerging within a category. For example, we've always had a client meeting support category, but now that category is inclusive of the growing segment of AI note takers, for example. And then um, because we can only produce so many categories with finite staff hours. We'll also strategically consolidate categories too. So, for example, I saw before we hopped on the call, you showed me your 2023 printed Advisor Tech report, and in
Yeah,
that
I'll
report,
show it here.
yes,
It's massive.
I'll show my 2025 Advisor Tech book too. But
There you go.
anywho, in that report, um, social security software and retirement income planning software were separate categories versus we decided to consolidate them this time around. So it's mostly a result of the changing nature of the marketplace, but where we can consolidate just to make the report more efficient. So there's not 100 categories and it's impossible for everybody to work through. If there are sort of functions that are complementary and related, again, like social security and just general retirement income planning, we'll then consolidate them into a single category.
Yeah, so when I wrote the first book, I'm pretty sure there were 36 categories. And then I thought that was okay until I met with an advisor that actually had like picked the tool in every single category. And I was like, I don't think that was the point. I don't think the point was to have 36 different advisor tech tools. So I'm trying to trim it way down this year because I don't know. Jason Wank says like you need 5 or 6 tools to run a stack, which I don't know that I can get down to 5 or 6, but maybe eventually.
This sort of gets into the debate between all-in-one and best-in-class tools. So just as background, the in our 2025 report, we found that the typical advisory firm used 15 distinct pieces of software to support 20 different business functions with technology. So why are those numbers different? Well, for example, one advisor could do general financial planning and focus specifically on, let's say, college savings and use their general financial planning software for both tools, while another advisor might use a dedicated college savings tool. So, all of that's to say, right now, the typical advisor tech stack includes 15 pieces of software, and even for the smallest firms. So, just think an unsupported solo advisor, right? No CSA. The solo advisor is the firm. Even unsupported solo firms use 11 distinct pieces of software,
Yeah.
which just speaks to how essential. I mean, I'm a former advisor. I was an advisor until 2024. My old firm had a very robust tech stack, and it just speaks to how essential technology is just to being an advisor today. But of course, if you use more all-in-one tools, then I can see the number of pieces of software reducing to say 6, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and that's what I hope for the industry is that instead of best in class, we have like best in 3 or best in 5.
Uh,
Like 3 to 5 functions per tool, and you don't end up with an all-in-one per se, but you end up with like tools that can do multiple things. Like a specific example is Investapal. Like Investapal scored super highly in Bob Veris' recent report. I always think of it as Bob Veris, but I think it's T3 first, maybe. Um, but they do a lot of things. Like they do risk tolerance questionnaire, they do investment analysis, they do like document upload, they do, but it's like 5 different functions, but they do them all decently well enough, or like proposal generation and IPS. Um, but advisors clearly like it because they gave it like nines and above on in a couple categories.
yeah, I mean, I agree that when when the tools are good, advisors like it. So just like for example, in our 2025 AdvisorTech study, Orion across categories had didn't have the highest satisfaction scores, but at Advison, if I was to pick one clear winner, of one vendor that was the winner of our last AdvisorTech study, I would say Advison, because in just about every category that they were in, I think we had included them in 7 different categories. I'd have to go back and check. They were the top, the top rated vendor, or among the top rated vendors. And I also agree the industry is moving this way. So I sort of distinctly remember sitting at the 2025 XYPN Advisor Tech Showcase next to my colleague Ben Henry Moreland, and we kept commenting to each other about how there were probably 3, maybe 4 companies in that showcase that were essentially AI wrappers that did 10 different things. Um, one of the developers made a comment to the effect of, one advisor emailed me saying it would be great to add a risk tolerance questionnaire function to our software, and then we just built it. So that sort of that anecdote sort of speaks to the trend you're pointing to.
Yeah, no, it is. So, I mean, one that's gotten some press is Findash. So Findash has a lot of capabilities in one system, but to me, it just looks like a lovable made like slop. Which I'm sorry to anyone at Findash, but like, yes, it does all these things, but it's just like there on the screen, and it's not. I don't know. I think if you put more love into a specific function and build it really well, that will do better than, the all-in-ones that are just trying to do every single part of the stack.
Absolutely. What I can say at a high level about the landscape now. So um, if you compare advisors who take an all-in-one approach to tech to advisors who take a best-in-class approach to tech, so predictably, the advisors that take an all-in-one approach, so they use a like at a holding the level of uh, business function supported by technology constant, they support those functions with fewer individual applications that do more things. So that's how we measure this. And predictably, right, the advisors that take an all-in-one approach, they spend less on technology as a share of practice revenue, and they're happier with their integration, right? Because there are fewer pieces
Sure.
than advisors who take a best in class approach, who spend more on technology and are less satisfied with integration. In exchange, right? That's the price for get having more choice over all your different tools, and again taking that best in class approach. What's interesting though is when we just look at overall tech stack satisfaction across the two approaches, it's completely identical. So, what that seems to suggest as of now is that no approach is decisively better than the other if the standard for better is just how happy the advisor is with their stack. And instead, advisors are pretty good at self selecting. If you're the kind of person who wants that level of choice over each particular facet of your stack, then you can be satisfied with the best in class approach. If you don't want to deal with all of those integrations, and again, as a former advisor, oh boy, was that challenging setting up all
Sure.
of these integrations, then that can work great for you. Now, one could respond to that and say, okay, well, maybe just self-reported satisfaction isn't the ideal metric, right? Advisors could be equally satisfied, but one of those segments, the all-in-one people or the best-in-class people, are, for example, generating far more revenue than the other. And we also find that that's not true. And that
Okay.
again, just comparing the two different approaches. Advisors that take a best in class approach have similar revenue per advisor and revenue per team member as advisors that take an all-in-one approach. So the even there things look pretty similar. The question now is, as you have this growing slate uh, uh, of this growing slate of all-in-one tools that are more liked by advisors than like the classic example folks think of is Orion, which tends to have very low satisfaction scores. As you have this newer wave of AI powered tools, will those numbers start to shift, and that all-in-one advisors taking an all-in-one approach maybe report higher satisfaction and generate greater revenue. So that's sort of a trend we'll continue keeping an eye on in future studies.
Yeah, for sure. No, and it's interesting that there's not a difference in like revenue. Whereas the next topic I want to discuss is like firms and advisors focused on efficiency versus like client experience slash
Sure.
quality. Because in that there's like a drastic difference. Which I find interesting. So basically, advisors focused on like the client experience and quality make twice as much as the ones focused on efficiency.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess just briefly by way of background. So we asked our survey respondents on our latest tech study what they think the most important role of technology is at advisory firms. And only about 2 in 10 advisors pointed to something related to efficiency, right?
Okay.
Whether reducing the amount of time they have to spend on admin work or reducing costs. The other 8 in 10 advisors uh, cited something related to the value that they provide the client, namely either the quality of their advice or clients' experience receiving that advice. And ironically, as you noted, Joe, what we find is that firms that primarily leverage technology to become more efficient are both less productive in terms of their revenue per advisor and revenue per team member, and they're literally just smaller in terms of absolute revenue than firms that adopt a more client-centered philosophy. So in other words, when you stop using technology to boost efficiency and you start using it to just be better, you ironically become bigger and more productive on average.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
No, I saw a quote today that was something like optimization is just a disguise for procrastination. Um, Also, I would say like maybe those advisors are more prone to like shiny object syndrome. So they're just spending so much time looking at new tech, trying to make it more efficient that they're actually not doing, you know, they're not working on their funnel, they're not working on closing, they're not working on client service. They're just so distracted by how can we make everything more efficient?
Yeah, I completely, that's a good way to put it. I completely agree about the shiny object syndrome. Another challenge that we've noted um, in our data is because I'm sure we both agree, right? There's nothing inherently that's preventing technology from helping advisors boost their efficiency. Anecdotally, we both probably can point to a lot of firms that are very tech leveraged and are doing great, right? And it's really powering their growth. But certainly one of the reasons why, on average, we don't see that relationship between using tech to boost efficiency, and we have more objective measures of it besides just their answer on like the primary function of technology. But in any case, one of the other reasons why using tech for efficiency doesn't necessarily, at least on average, boost productivity is that, so when you look at our research on advisor productivity, one of the most important key drivers of productivity, very intuitively, is serving affluent clients that can pay you well for the work that you do, right? All advisors could probably guess that. And very often, when advisors have an unprofitable client problem, so as background, it's very hard to have a productive advisory firm when your average revenue per client is less than $3,000 per year. So, anyways, when advisors have an unprofitable clients problem, they try to solve the problem by serving a large number of unprofitable clients more efficiently. That is to say, they try to efficiency their way into serving a large volume of low revenue per client um, of clients that generate low revenue each year. And what we find is that tech is not a solution to an unprofitable clients problem. Instead, the solution is uh, just solving the unprofitable clients problem by moving up market. So that, at least in our data, is what stands out of why, no matter how we measure it, right? So I published an article on our platform where I counted the number of efficiency boosting applications advisors use, and then I compared the time they spend on admin work for advisors using a lot of them with advisors using few of them, and there was no difference. In our tech
Okay.
study, we look at the relationship between like admin time and productivity, comparing at firms with the most sophisticated tech with the least sophisticated tech. There's not much of a lift on admin work, and there, again, it's not because tech inherently can't do it. We've seen plenty of anecdotes where it can. Instead, it's because advisors are shiny object syndrome, as you said, and then another reason is advisors are trying to solve an unprofitable clients problem by just being more efficient and serving many more of those clients, as opposed to actually moving up market.
I think we're going to see AI just make this issue even worse, meaning the advisors most attracted to AI are the ones that are trying to um, become more efficient. They're struggling to get clients, maybe they're struggling to be profitable, and they think AI will solve it. And I think with how much distraction, with how distracted they're going to be by all this AI stuff, they're going to become even less profitable. That's a hot take, maybe, but it.
So, in other words, you're suggesting that, tell me if I'm getting this right, that as the barrier to trying to become more tech leveraged, of relying on tech to be more efficient, goes down as the nature of this technology improves, that more and more advisors are going to look to tech to try to become more efficient because it's easier to do so. Is that more or less what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the question like an advisor without AI is going to replace an advisor without AI. And I actually think fundamentally a very good advisor serving clients profitably is not really threatened at all by AI. I think,
Mhm.
I mean, if a very good advisor is using AI to even be even that much better, they're going to be unbeatable. But I don't think that it's advisors with AI versus advisors not using AI. I think it's really good advisors versus everyone else, which isn't really any different than it is now. It's just the really good ones will continue doing really good, and the ones that aren't good at running businesses will continue not being good at running businesses.
I totally agree with that. And then just backtracking slightly to your point on AI will make it easier for advisors to just really invest heavily in tech to try to solve efficiency, to try to make themselves more efficient when efficiency isn't really the root of their problems. Um, I, it's even worse than that because not only can advisors try to rely on the growing number of AI powered tools that other people are creating, it's easier than ever to vibe code your own AI tools. And like, as anyone who follows our existing advisor tech landscape knows, our industry loves that. There's a comically long list of large companies that we've all heard of: Redtail, iRebal, Tamarack, etc., that like basically started out as an advisor builds a piece of software to solve a problem at their firm, and then they start selling the software to their advisor friends, and then it keeps growing, and then all of a sudden that they have a software company on the side, right? So our industry has a comical number of such examples, and now with AI, right, with AI assisted coding, with um, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name, like where you can build software without actually needing to code. But
Oh,
in any
vibe
case,
coding.
yeah, there's another word I'm thinking of. But
Okay.
in any case, the barrier to building your own software is further and further reducing because of AI. So like I know right now our people always point to our our Kitces Tech Map as so. Of course, for everyone familiar with our Kitces Tech Map, there's so many different companies on the map that you at this point you can't even really see the logos of any particular company. And the primary function of our Advisor Tech Map is just self-referential meta commentary to talk about how dense the map is. So as a result, people always ask, like, there's going to be some consolidation, right? And at least my 2 cents, I'm very curious because you follow this space closer than I do. My 2 cents is no, because all the incentives that led to, again, all of these advisors, creating their own tools and then selling it to their advisor friends, and then having a software company on the side where you don't actually need that many clients in order for the company to be profitable because you're actually just using the software at your own firm and getting some value out of it. That the number of icons on the Kitces Tech Map is going to grow and grow and grow. So let me pause there. I'm very curious how you'll interact with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's two arguments. I mean, I had a conversation with Jason Wenk, and like we're talking about the valuations of like Jump and Zox and Finny, and like why were they pulling in these huge valuations? And he's like, they're trying to take the entire map. Like they're not trying to just take one category. They're trying to build something that will gobble up 10 categories, 20 categories. Um, and that became super insightful because it's like 80% of these companies could go out of business in the next few years, potentially. Like that's one argument. The other argument is the moat to building software is gone, and we're going to have thousands of advisor tech companies in the next few years. Um,
Yeah.
what's more
Forgive me. Go
likely
ahead.
to happen?
Um, I lean towards argument number two. The fact remains that while yes, I can imagine some of these companies increasing their market share considerably. So you mentioned Jump. Um, the fact remains that just because of the amount of homegrown advisor tech solutions, so many companies, at least a lot of the smaller ones, are just immune to typical VC cycles, where again, you don't need a huge number of clients for the tech to be profitable because it's homegrown. You use it at your firm, and then again, now you're selling it to your advisor friends, and then now you build a website and then sell it to other advisors that you don't know. So I definitely lean towards argument two, and my suspicion is that um, again, because these homegrown companies tend to be immune to like typical VC cycles we see in other industries, because it's the barrier to producing tools is lower than ever. My suspicion is that the number is going to continue to grow, but
Yeah.
I guess we'll see. This is another trend we'll be watching closely. I would
Uh,
love, as somebody, okay, who writes a good chunk of a very widely read advisor tech study, I would love for the number of vendors to go down because it would significantly reduce the amount of time you have to spend writing this thing.
this is I try not to say this publicly, but I might say it. Part of the point of my book is to like put swaths of companies out of business so that advisors don't get so much of their time wasted. Because just think about it. Like if there's 40 AI note takers for advisors, all of them with VC money, all of them trying to get advisors' attention, advisors are going to be harassed at a level like completely unprecedented in the industry, which is interesting because like technology is supposed to save people time, but I feel like as the map grows, as AI comes into the picture, like humans are going to be busier and less productive than ever. If that, I mean, that just seems to be the trend that we're going on,
Yeah, that's actually there's a lot of discussion about just what prompts advisors to switch technology, right? And
right?
vendors sure wish advisors would switch tech more than they do. So, like the typical advisor, at least in our data, will change at most one piece of software a year, just because of the amount of investment required to just move data from one piece of software to another. So if the typical, as we noted earlier, if the typical advisor uses 15 pieces of software and you're changing one per year, cycling through the entire stack takes a very long time. But oh boy, I was trying to remember how this came up. So in addition to the obvious costs of switching technology, namely just paying staff members or somebody external to move everything over, right? To get client data in the new financial planning software, although, they're releasing functions that allow you to move that data more quickly. There's another more hidden cost, which is how do you decide which company to use when there's so many? It's the classic paralysis of choice. Not to just be throwing Mark's quotes out here, but there's just so many different options that just having to do the research to decide which piece of tech to use is a significant cost in terms of advisor time that firms must incur in order to make those decisions.
Yeah, so if there's 600 companies, and let's say that number grows to 1,200 over the next couple of years,
Uh,
um, they're all releasing new AI features every single week. So, like, consultants can't keep up. If consultants at one point could keep up, I don't think consultants can keep up anymore. That like do this full time, let alone advisors who, you know, how are advisors supposed to keep up with technology? Um, this is it's just interesting just reading the comments on my LinkedIn post from this morning. I was like, oh, Jump announced something new and Dispatch announced something new and Prescient or something is a new company. I was like, I can't keep up. Like it's just I just went and sat for a while and I was like, what is my role in all this mess?
if Joe Moss, who lives, eats, and breathes this stuff, can't keep up, that really points to a broader problem.
So if we had like three Marks and four Bens and seven Michaels, like would you guys all be able to keep up?
um, Certainly not me. I mean, there's a reason why I sort of gladly hand the baton to Ben and Michael when it comes to those write ups for the 45 categories. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Okay, so you're actually leading through my questions very well, but the next one was around switching technology. And I think a standout in the space is Jump. I mean, Jump's at 27,000 advisors. I think 3,000 or so they purchased, or 2 or 3,000 with mobile assistant, but they've grown in basically 2 years to 27,000 advisors, which is I just feel like is massive. Um, and then there's AI note takers beyond them. Why do you think this one particular category has done so incredibly well when in general advisors switch very slowly?
Yeah. Well, one big so there are some categories where there's just not that much more room for growth, right? So financial planning software has more than 90% adoption. We saw within like the last decade e-signature shoot up and now has more than 90% adoption. Other categories are following a similar trajectory, right? Scheduling, I think, is I don't have our data up right here. I think it's at least 70% adoption rate. Advisors use some sort of scheduling tool. um, Client meeting support right now is it's used by, let me, here I'm just pulling it up. In 2025 it was used by 40% of advisors in our sample. So there's a good amount of room for growth, and more advisors are sort of looking at other advisors using Jump or other AI supported note takers, becoming really interested and indicating that they want to adopt technology in this category. So for example, in 2026 our data projects that adoption rate is going to tick up to 43%. The reason why that matters is because it's much easier to grow in market share when your category is growing and you don't need to win over advisors who are using and who are switching from somebody else,
Sure.
because you can just gobble up a huge share of new advisors, right? Contrast that to something like tax planning, right? Where just Holistoplan is just the hegemon there, right? And their advisors are extremely satisfied with Holistoplan. Their satisfaction dipped a little bit when they raised their prices because they were just like unsustainably low for a little bit. But like
Sure.
advisors love Histoplan. It's dominant in that category. So if you want to start using tax planning software because you want to go to a level of depth that's not covered by your increasingly capable general financial planning software, well, there's a clear sort of hegemon in that category. Also, tax planning has higher adoption. When it comes to client meeting support, again, with adoption still in the 40s, lots of new advisors flooding in there, you're not having to siphon support off from this just large dominant player. You can just you can you can just uh, draw from advisors who are interested in that technology. So I think at the highest level, um, that for me is the most important reason contributing to their growth. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting compared to what we were talking before about like advisors pursuing efficiency. Like Jump Zox marketing has been entirely focused on we'll save you 5 to 10 hours a week in productivity. I like to
Mhm.
joke they're like, oh, they'll save you 40 hours a week and you won't have a job anymore. But um, I've even talked to them. I was like, you guys, based on the research from Kits, is you guys should change your marketing to be more focused on, we'll provide better advice, more timely advice, a better client experience as opposed to just the time savings. But the time savings marketing seems to be working. So um, that is interesting. So like three of the best Substacks I've ever written have been about Jump, and I thought Jump was building a not note taker, a CRM. They launched like a contacts feature, and they put it on their website. They made it sound like a CRM. I wrote about it. They actually changed their website to make it sound less like a CRM. They're like, we're not competing with CRM. Um, but it hasn't made sense to me that they're not building a CRM. But some of these companies are just so focused on enterprises, and for an enterprise to switch out of a CRM or out of a portfolio management system is just so almost insurmountable that I think it kind of makes sense. Like if you want to be an AI overlay to all these legacy tools, maybe that's a whole lot easier than, and this kind of goes along with what you're saying with the category adoption, than trying to replace CRM.
Yeah. So a few points in order. So you had mentioned um, their efficiency marketing is working for them. I do want to note that efficiency marketing can work, and in fact, we've in our latest report, we even um, outlined one form of efficiency marketing that better resonates with advisors um, than others. So this is in the context of AI enabled um, software. Okay, we asked advisors who either currently use AI powered tools or who are interested in using these tools, what's most important? That the AI serves essentially as a brainstorming buddy early on, and then you're doing the bulk of the work. So it helps initiate the process. Using AI to expedite a process and make it much faster, but there's still a human in the loop as a permanent feature of that workflow, or whether they want to use AI to fully automate a process and take a human entirely out of the loop. And decisively, the most common option was that middle one. Advisors want AI to take their least favorite task and reduce the amount of work by 80%, but just keep them in the loop, which sort of makes sense, right? If you imagine if you're an advisor and your CSA makes a mistake, you can just profusely apologize to the client. Just say, sorry, it was a mistake. If you're an advisor and your robot makes a mistake because you're out of the loop, it just looks like your systems and processes are entirely out of whack and they're just going to fire you because they think you're incompetent because you don't
Right.
have good systems in place. So just on the efficiency point, I do think that marketing can work, and especially if you're marketing, and I actually am seeing this increasingly. I would like to think, in part because of our research, and this is sort of a drum Michael and I and others have been beating on the Kitsis platform, which is just advisors like efficiency when they are in the loop. Now, I'll pause there before I get to your CRM AI wrapper point.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And I think like even in like the prospecting category and organic growth is one I've been thinking about a lot. And advisors that are having success with prospecting tools are deeply involved in building a brand and putting out content and then coupling that with outbound prospecting. Whereas the ones that are like completely outsourcing all the email writing, DM writing, outbound to AI are getting almost no results at all. So
Mhm.
human in the loop definitely works better for a process generally, I would say, than outsourcing it completely to AI.
Yeah. I guess switching now to your point about will Jump create eventually create a CRM?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, well, this is an important conversation in part when we think about technology hubs, right? Just a hub, that the central focal point that you have all of your other pieces of technology filtering into. The first place as an advisor you log into when you enter the office in the morning. Um, and the sort of disruptive potential of these right now, AI note taker, AI meeting support tools potentially hopping into the CRM category. This is relevant because right now CRMs are decisively the most popular hub of the advisor tech stack, right? Nearly half of advisors, when we ask them in our surveys, what is the hub of your tech stack? They say, my CRM. And notably, at least since our 2023 survey, so between 2023 and 2025, uh, the share of advisors selecting their CRM as the hub of their stack grew. Um, the other hub that grew between 2023 and 2025 was actually advisors using their custodial platform.
Okay.
Um, and then what you see, but even still, custodial platforms are only used as the hub of the stack by about 15% of advisors. Where we do decisively see advisors moving away from are advisors who use their financial planning software as the hub of their financial planning software and their portfolio management system as the hub of their stack. And I think part of the reason why that, like, for example, CRM is dominant and becoming more popular, and advisors are moving away from, for example, financial planning software. And I promise I'm going to connect this to Jump. I'm working my way there.
No,
Um,
yeah, I understand. I understand where we're going.
okay. Then maybe for the viewers, I'm working my way there. But part of the reason why CRM is both dominant and becoming more um, popular is because advisors just really want a centralized hub or an operating system to just manage all the tasks and workflows of their business. So, actually, relatedly, in our latest AdvisorTech survey, we're actually seeing some increasing interest in advisors using just straight up task management platforms like Asana or Monday.com, just sort of wanting to bring order to the chaos and using some platform to just, again, centralize all these tasks and workflows. So increasingly, that's what advisors are looking for. So not just a CRM, but that holistic operating system um, for the entire firm. And so, to finally connect it to the original point, some sort of trends I'm looking towards going forward are, first, just given the growing number of advisors who uh, are relying on their custodial platform as their hub, whether these platforms will just build a successful or a useful and successful middleware layer that handles everything that advisors want. So that's sort of the first trend, right? Whether custodial platforms build that, again, that kind of middleware layer. And then the second trend is whether these, again, AI powered meeting support note taker tools, which are already just mountains of data, build some sort of architecture and just inevitably, especially, I mean, you follow all the valuations much more closely than I do, but at least just given what I'm seeing, given some of the valuations of these tools, I find it hard to believe that despite what they're telling you, Joe, that they are not going to hop into that CRM category, at least over the intermediate to long term.
Okay, you don't think they're gonna hop into it.
No, forgive me. I do. I find it
You
hard to
do think.
believe that they
Y
won't,
right, okay.
because, again, they just sort of, they're already just uh, massive warehouses of data, and they just need to build some sort of advisor-facing architecture. And then, just given the existing evaluations, I feel like they'll need to do something to justify commanding higher price points. And how will they do that? In my view, perhaps building CRM. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, so, like, if you think about your 45 categories, you have a data lake or a data layer, and then you have 44 agents that sit on top of it to do each part of the advisor's, workflow, which is one way to look at it. And that's very openly like what Jason Wang's been talking about having Altruist, the custodial layer, and then Hazel, the tax planning tool, the meeting prep tool, the financial planning tool. But like building an agent into each one of those categories per quarter is kind of what he said recently. That
Yeah,
will be interesting to watch that play out.
yeah. So that's definitely, uh, I guess, keep an eye out for a 2027 study, because this will be an area where we dedicate a lot of focus.
So we've talked a lot about what's happened or the research up until now. Do you guys do much like projecting the future, crystal ball type work?
Um, I personally, just recognizing that I don't follow this sort of day to day nitty gritty updates like you or Ben or maybe Michael. I'm a little bit more cautious, so I'll beyond. I am pretty convinced that the number of advisor tech companies will continue to grow. I don't buy the consolidation argument. But I guess besides that, I do think a lot of these client meeting support tools will be incentivized to um, build CRMs, and then just like broadly, we're going to see a rise in like AI wrapper, we do everything pieces of software. I just I'm a little bit more cautious than maybe some of my colleagues or yourself who follow this a bit more closely than I do.
Sure. No,
Can
I
you
was
share
like,
some insights from your crystal ball?
um, advisors want simplicity. I mean, like, there's one advisor was like, we want one browser tab or one pane of glass into everything we need to do. I don't practically think we'll get there, but I like talking about like three screens. Like you've got your custodian, you've got your CRM, and then you've got maybe a third screen that you can flip between things, between Zoom, between financial planning tool, between maybe your phone system. Um, but you're always going to need, well, except for the advice only folks, you're always going to need a custodian and you're going to need a CRM. And then you've got kind of a third screen where you're still flipping between maybe more specialized tools.
The which I mean, advice only folks at this point are only about 6% of all advisors. Now, what's interesting is you actually do see that that 6% exert themselves in the sense that there used to be more parity between adoption of CRM and financial planning software on one hand and portfolio management software on the other. And then now portfolio management software has slipped a little bit in adoption relative to the other two. As background, we at Kitsis refer to portfolio management, financial planning, and CRM as the big three.
Okay.
But portfolio management has slipped a little bit in adoption relative to the other two, in part just because of that small, still small but growing share of advice only advisors.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting trend, like going through fiduciary, and now the advice only people are kind of villainizing the AUM people, which I don't know. I think AUM will be around for a long time, but I definitely understand the argument against charging a percentage of assets in order to do a core set of things.
Yeah, I think AUM will be around for a while, and you can never scroll on LinkedIn without just seeing today's edition of the pricing wars. But I think AUM is here to stay.
It's the best business model on earth. I don't know that there's a better business model than we'll take a
Totally
percentage
agree.
of of your assets.
Absolutely.
Cool. So what do you guys have any other research projects down planning beyond these top four, or mainly just like maintaining and developing these four that you already have?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the four reoccurring research studies will always remain the staple and the beating heart of our research efforts. And as you've seen, Joe, as someone who's interacted with our reports, while we repeat the same reports every 2 years. Every 2 years, we choose to focus on different domains. So, for example, in our 2025 tech study, we focused a bit on AI. In our last two marketing studies, we focused a bit on the SEC marketing rule. In our well-being study, we're focusing on or that just was publicly released uh, March 9th. We focused on um, the outside ownership and private capital taking stakes in advisory firms. our research studies will always remain the beating heart of our research efforts, but we'll kind of choose to focus on different areas. But beyond that, we're publishing a greater number of research pieces on the blog. So, subscribers to our Nerds Eye View mailing list can keep an eye out for those. I gave the example earlier of my piece looking at just whether indeed using a greater number of efficiency boosting pieces of technology increases efficiency measured in admin time. The answer, at least on average, was no. Um, the and actually, the best way to reduce admin time isn't try to solve the efficiency problem with technology. It's just you hire a CSA or an associate advisor, and you just make it their problem. All of the admin work. But I guess beyond that, the plan is within the next couple of years we'll start releasing some additional pieces of research outside of the four studies as like standalone reports. But uh, that's in very early stages at this point, so folks can stay tuned for that.
Sure. No, I kind of my last question is around deep work, nerdiness, distraction. I mean, personally, to be honest, I struggle a lot with distraction right now. With like LinkedIn, with demos, with trying to keep up, and then find it's really hard to get my brain to like settle down to the point where I can focus and do something for several hours at a time. Um, you guys seem to have a knack for being able to focus and produce enormously long reports. How do you how do you all work best, I guess?
Yeah. So I can speak to myself personally, but actually before I do, just to speak to the Kitsis ethos, every new Kitsis employee, after while they're being onboarded, gets a copy of Cal Newport's Deep Work mailed
Okay,
to them. And
sure.
we are strongly encouraged as employees to block out large chunks of time on our calendar where we are incommunicado, don't reach out to us. We're focused on writing, etc. Now for myself personally, I do a couple of things. I, for one, have very little self control with my phone. So one thing I do there is I just use the phone foyer method, i.e., I have my phone plugged in another room while I'm
Okay,
working, and if I want to use my phone, I have to physically walk up and walk to my phone, and that little bit of added friction reduces the uh, just reduces the amount of time I check it. I personally do time block planning. I actually have right here on my desk my time block planner, where this you can see like meetings right here, a big block of deep work in
yep.
the afternoon. So I do a lot of time block planning. Another thing that I do, because sometimes I have to do very large quantities of writing. So there's basically 2 months of a year before we finish each of our two research studies. Where basically all day, every day, I am writing. And as an author yourself, Joe, there's only so much creative energy you can expend at one time. So one thing that I like to do is, in addition to doing time block planning, so during my writing blocks, I am not surfing the web. I'm not checking email. I block out when I do that time in my daily time block planning. In addition to that, I know that when I'm working at home, I can get maybe 3 to 4 hours of creative work done at my desk before I start to get distracted. I want to go on chess.com and play a couple bullet games,
Sure.
right? So once I reach that point, once I reach the chess.com point, I pack up my laptop, I go to Panera Bread, and then the change of environment lets me get maybe another 2 hours
Okay.
in. Just the faint chatter, the warm tomato soup, um, all of it. The cookie that I get that I don't tell my wife about, so she doesn't know I'm eating chocolate. All of that really helps me get that extra couple hours. I sort of reach my 3 hour creative limit at home. I go
Okay.
to Panera, and then I'm able to get another couple hours there. And now you are stuck, Joe, with the mental image of me writing the recent tech study while eating tomato soup at the North Andover, Massachusetts Panera. So
That's
I guess I'll
good.
have to leave you with that. Yeah.
No, I like to hear that. And I think it's something all of us humans are gonna struggle with actively. I mean, especially with I view screens like dementors, like they're just basically like sucking your soul from you all the time.
So what do you do? I know you mentioned like one thing a lot of us struggle with is distraction. So I mean I just shared. What do you do?
Um I go through actually like multi-month seasons of like productivity and then not very much productivity. Just the who I am basically. So there are seasons where I'll wake up like super early, like 3 to 4, and I have an idea and I just like run with it. And I feel like some of my best writing comes at those like 3 to 5 a.m. in the morning when I'm super in tune to the the muse or whatever. Um,
Uh-huh.
Other times it's just more just around, you know, figuring out exactly what I'm gonna write about and then starting to collect like inspirational, podcasts or blogs or quotes or and then kind of use the inspiration from the content that I've put together to but honestly like time blocking and focus are something I need to work on.
I feel like people tend to look down on structuring your workload in a seasonal way, but general they'll say, "Oh, that's just because that's at some points in time your workload isn't sustainable and therefore you have to sort of be a little bit bursty and you could level it out." I love having a seasonal workload. Um, there's something really, I mean, maybe I'm just like very twisted in the head, and this isn't normal. There's something really thrilling to me about having, maybe a 2 month sprint period where you're kind of single-mindedly focused on like one or two major tasks. In my case, it's our research studies, and I try to cram all of my admin stuff in the morning, and I can just sink my evenings into writing these reports for like a month or a month and a half. The
Yeah.
trips to Panera I mentioned earlier. I love the seasonal nature of work. It seems like you've sort of enjoyed that too.
Yeah, no, it's helpful mentally because I know like sometimes I have to work very hard to write creatively, and other times like I can do nothing but think about writing creatively. So just being willing to work with my own body and brain and how in those different seasons, I think will make me a happier person overall. Um,
Awesome.
but that's cool. All right. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast today. This has been great, and I'm sure we'll have much more to discuss by the time 2027 rolls around.
Yeah, Joe, this was great. Thanks for having me on, and I can't wait to get my 2026 tech book.
All right. Well, I better block some time and write that thing.
There you go.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye
All
bye.
right. See ya.